Welcome to Hive Mind Community podcast brought to you by TechSoup. Our podcast is a part of the Digital Activism program through which we provide the civil society with knowledge, tools, grants and networking opportunities so they can thrive. Welcome. In today's episode, we will be discussing climate activism. The guest on our podcast is Wiktoria Jędroszkowiak, a climate justice and peace activist, campaigner in Fridays for Future, a global youth movement, and co-founder of Wschód, an initiative for bold people fighting fossil crisis in Poland and Eastern Europe.
I guess that's us. Hello.
This is us. Excited to talk to you, Wiktoria. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like, Wschód is less than 2 years old as the whole idea, and the initiative itself is just turning 1 year now. So I feel like we're having our birthday and it's super nice to be invited to such
Happy
spaces.
birthday.
Thank you.
Best wishes for your initiatives and many years of future actions, because
Thank you so much.
This is also great. So let's start with the general and broad topic of our conversation, climate activism. What is, or rather what can be, climate activism? And how do activists get organized in such a broad and interdisciplinary subject that needs knowledge of many?
Do we get organized? That's very interesting. I feel like, climate activism is something that we all have our definition for. And my definition would be that it is one of many different fields of activism that tries to put things that we know into work in a way so that we can see the world that is different, that is far different from what we're experiencing now and what people around the world are experiencing. And we make it possible because we believe that it is possible, if that makes sense. So also the term climate activism to me, I feel like it's very outdated now. And I still use that, so maybe that's not that's not so honest of me. But I feel like we used to use this term in 2019, 2020 when we were talking so much about, kind of making putting more attention of our leaders to climate science. That was very clear that we need to phase out fossil fuels. We need to do so much in order to stop the global temperature, the rising of global temperature at 1.5 Celsius degrees. And I feel like in the last few years, it got completely different. And kind of things and matters that we see are far different from what we've been doing since 2019. So for example, with the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the full-scale war, we're very much focused here in Poland. And that's how Wschód kind of, as an idea, arose. We were very focused on how to show that fossil fuels are not only fueling and fossil fuel industry is not only fueling the climate crisis, but also wars around the world, including this particular war that is threatening whole Europe for sure. So we knew that, being also peace activists and kind of people from this humanitarian side, I personally had some experience around kind of different humanitarian work here in Poland already with refugees from Syria in 2015 and 2016 and that's how I started doing activism. And we knew that, kind of this Polish, very unique experience also of Russia is a channel towards the whole climate movement to show that our anti-Western, let's say, approach shouldn't be kind of the main focus now. The main focus should be Ukrainians who are fighting for us all, kind of.
What also changed from 2019? Because preparing for our conversation, I was also thinking about this 2019. That was the start of the global mobilization in different parts of the world with such movements as Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion doing a lot of stuff. And of course, you mentioned war, but I was wondering how does climate activism or blank space of different word that we should use that, for example, would resonate better right now. But what also changed during this 5-year period, because it seemed to be quite short, but many things happened and many things changed and improved. And from your perspective, your experience, how it looks now, and where the focus shifted, for example, or maybe what things also are already achieved, let's say, by the movement and the activists.
I honestly don't think that is a short period, because also, like thinking that people who were very often the biggest drivers of this movement were in their teenage years, like these 5 last years. It's, like a lot, it's like 30% of their life, for example. We started in 2019, 2018 with Fridays for Future. And I was at the time 17, like just on the way to turn 18. I was a high school student. Now I'm going to turn 23 this year. Throughout this time, I happened to drop out from the uni to do this work. I happened to be so much connected with the climate network around the world that I feel like it changed everything. And I feel like it's to many people from the movement, it's like a similar approach, I'd say. But I feel like what mainly changed is that when you look at the map from the biggest mobilizations that happened, so the ones in September 2019, both Extinction Rebellion and Fridays for Future and different youth strikes for climate groups, you would see that this global thing that we are talking about was happening in Europe and in the US. And of course, there were people hitting the street in Latin America or in Africa, but the scale of these strikes, but also the scale of the whole conversation about that within their media was far different. And something that very lately my friend who moved from Colombia to here to Poland told me that, I remember being so angry in 2019 looking at the strikes in Germany, for example, because there were the biggest strike always, and thinking that, hey, it's not what we are fighting for. We are fighting for the very urgent shift of global economics, because we know that how the global power dynamics looks like is severely unjust towards us, and is costing us lives, costing us balance in our lives. And I feel like that's something that we are missing. And I don't blame us in a way. I mean, I was 17. What did I know? Being raised in Poland, also in a country that had this huge kind of ambition to be like the Western Europe. Also, before the war, we were trying so hard to be like Germany, like the UK, like France. And I feel like it's very much changed, both for Polish people and for climate activists. But I feel like only the war in Ukraine made me realize how wrong we were before, and that, the whole kind of 1.5 argument is, of course, the core argument for the climate science, and should be the core argument for people who are the governments and the companies that are fueling the climate crisis the most. But it's not, and it shouldn't be the biggest argument for us, the common people. So that's something that for me shifted so much.
I was wondering and thinking, kind of comparing this beginning of 2019 and the reflections that you just shared about this shift, and thinking about 5 years is also half a decade. So it might be seen as quite short in terms of the other changes, but it's long enough. And I was wondering about climate activism, localized on country or region level, or globalized. And I was thinking, is the concept of global movement that kind of was presented to the global community of activists with Extinction Rebellion or Fridays for Future. That is, you have the Extinction Rebellion, name the country, Fridays for Future, name the country. From your experience, and you kind of started it, and I would like to ask you more on this, to maybe think about splitting it according to the cultural context, historic context. So what do you think about the climate activism, the localized versus globalized, or maybe some kind of configuration as the problem is the global problem, and all of the people are involved in some way?
I think we need both. And I really much still admire what Fridays for Future have done as a whole movement. And it's been amazing to be a part of it and to feel that, there are so many big wins that the movement has around the world. And also there's so much solidarity, not always, but very often. For example, for those people, towards those people who are suffering the most, but also those who, for example, like have criminal charges over their activism. And I feel like that's something that taught me so much. But I feel like we should also ask that question for those people who are severely affected, not only, us hanging out in Warsaw, either way. But to me, it was very helpful to like understand different contexts, to try to understand different contexts, but also to be able to not only focus on, like this Polish kind of level of politics. Because, for example, the work that we have been doing within the EU actually led to creating European New Deal and like European Green Deal. And is it enough? I don't think so. Is it going to save us from climate crisis? Surely not. But like this whole drama around climate and around how we are just like demanding the basics, I think that's something that really changed the discourse within, for example, European institutions. But it wasn't enough. And I feel that's something we learned from that. And that's why, for example, we also knew that we need to understand our people more, because I will never be able to understand German people or Colombian people or who else better than the Polish people. So there's this, like this weird ambition, I'd say, or this like kind of desire for young Polish students, or there was when I was in high school, to leave, to go to a fancy uni abroad and all of that. I didn't do that, even though I could. Maybe the money problem would be always a problem, but you can always organize that. But I feel like, and that's also how I met Dominika, so like one of the co-founders of Wschód. And we were trying like to do it from the other side. So we weren't trying to like at first go to fancy uni in the Netherlands or the UK, come back and be like, okay, now I understand, now I know,
Bringing the Western knowledge.
Yeah, it's very often like the same when people like move to Warsaw, for example, and come back for Christmas. And now they're like, okay, mom, I'm going to teach you how you should raise me, for example. And it's so stupid. Like, we shouldn't be doing that, right? Like, there's so many things and there's so much like cultural knowledge, the knowledge that our land holds in a way that we should understand. For example, when it comes to the war, there's no better way for me to understand Ukrainian people than looking at what happened in Polish history. There's no better way to understand, like for me to understand what's happening in Palestine right now than looking at Polish history. Remember about ghettos, remember about the uprising here, remember about Auschwitz, for example, like these kind of things. And I know that, always the Auschwitz kind of argument is the hard one. But hey, like we are the ones who can own that. Like it happened in our land, it happened in our country. That's something that we need to carry like kind of on. And I feel like, getting deeper into what we know and what is also like within our people, like the common people. That's also, for example, what brought so many people to the elections this year. Because we knew that we cannot just speak about, for example, abortion or human rights, even though these are the basics, because for many people, recognition of rights is the one thing, very much connected with like this neoliberal kind of scheme of doing politics. But the other thing that, for example, was very much often electing PiS, so the Law and Justice Party in Poland, was this whole problem of redistribution of wealth. And we have to show that there's no recognition of rights without redistribution of wealth. And I feel like that's also what Wschód wants to show with this still like kind of climate ecological approach. But we want to talk about things that really matter to people, because we are here to answer these crises, to answer these problems when leaders cannot, if that makes sense.
And how to educate and act for climate change. Could you share a bit about how you are trying to build a new narratives, let's say, as Wschód, because you have those 3 pillars that I will read from your website. You have mobilizing actions, promoting solutions, and confronting politicians. And if you could share a bit on the, how do you do this and kind of inspire, let's say, some of our listeners.
Like these 3 pillars that you've mentioned, like these are the things that we are trying to do. So we confront politicians because we feel like always when they're confronted with the truth, they finally need to even like rethink their decisions, for example. So in Poland, with like a huge scale of, for example, fossil fuel lobbying, mainly coal lobbying, there was very often this kind of feeling that the only way to like make sure that the miners and people from the mining communities will be safe is to keep on with extracting coal and burning coal, which that's completely different when you ask people who actually are from the mining regions. So what we've done was asking the miners, okay, so guys, what do you need? And then we were trying to kind of using like the fact that we're young, we have more time, we have like more space to do that. We also are, I don't know, we don't have, kids to take everywhere with us. We were going to different rallies in the election year, asking politicians, for example, the ex-Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, but also I feel like we've confronted Donald Tusk, so the current Prime Minister, like 5 times on different topics. And I'm not saying that to brag about it. I'm just saying that there were many people involved in that. So that's why we need to mobilize others, because if that would be me or my 2 other friends all the time, like it would be very easy for politicians to just say, okay, these 3 or 4 crazy young people, they just need to, I don't know, find job and get alive. And I would agree with that. So we need distributed movement. We need people who also will, make like kind of like take me accountable, if that makes sense. So like they need to say, okay, I understand your point with, I don't know, like targeting Orlen, so the biggest oil company. But what about, I don't know, people living in Płock, so the place that is so full of Orlen's money? And I feel like these kind of questions and these conversations are very much important. And like hence going to kind of like the third pillar, so showing the solutions. Like we are not here to make people afraid of climate crisis. We are not here to make people afraid of the reality that we're living in. And very often people around the world, they have it so much worse and they will have it so much worse. We are here to show people that different Poland and different world is possible. That's also one of the biggest chants that Fridays for Future are using, mainly Fridays for Future MAPA, so people from the most affected areas. And it, like it's so crazy for me to, when I hear like, I don't know, at climate summits, people protesting, people from Pacific Islands, people who are actually talking about their whole islands, their homes getting like sunk in next 40 years or so, like within their lives. If they can say that another world is possible, we for sure need to find the solutions. And also in last 30 years, since kind of stopped being under the communist regime, we are on our own, like as a Poland. And I feel like we've been contributing to climate crisis heavily. Of course, not in a way that China or India or the US does or Germany, but we need to like take that into account. And we talk about so much about redistribution in Poland and how very often redistribution. Oh my God, we talk so much about how do you say that? The like paying money for things that, for example, Germany has done to our country. And we need to also use that reparations. We also need to use that word and that action towards places that we just harmed. And of course, it has to be just, and it has to be still like put our people, so like the Polish people in the, or like people living in Poland, like in the kind of in the middle of the whole problem, because we cannot like make the normal people pay for the climate just transition. Because that's not like that's not who created the problem. So the big corporations, the billionaires, the millionaires in Poland, politicians have to pay for that, not the common people.
What are the biggest threats in disinformation and misinformation? So the situation when the spreader is intentionally, in case of disinformation, sharing some lies that are not true, but also misinformation. So some accidental viral things that people are sharing on, for example, like such platforms or as TikTok or Twitter, X or other platforms. What threats do you see in your organization, of course, but also what is mostly threatening for climate activism in this online platform?
So I feel like there are 3 things to it. The first thing is to ask ourselves who are the group of interests that really are taking profit from business as usual, or also like the business as usual, because I don't know such people. I mean, honestly, like business as usual is not good for any of us. The fact that we work too much, the fact that we are like, we're working in the very like bad conditions, that we don't get enough pay, that, it's impossible in Poland for a person who's, kind of like earning the approximate amount of money each month. It's impossible for these people to own a flat, like to own a roof. It's crazy. Like I was joking with my friend the other day that it's so funny that we earning like kind of like normal money. We see that there's just no way for us to own a flat if we want, like kind of get it from our parents, for example, or like our grandparents. So it's just like this whole system is so unjust, even with such stupid things. Like your friend can have it all the other way, like have a completely different life just because they can inherit, not 10,000 flats, but one. Like it's crazy. And so that's the one thing that I feel like our also as Wschód goal is to show that, hey, no one likes capitalism. If you think that you like capitalism made you think that. Like these people, the rich people who are taking advantage of you, they made you think that. I really liked the other day I was watching this TikTok from like one of the US media outlets where one of the journalists with like Palestinian roots or so was asked about the Houthis attack, and like the thing that people cared the most when asking about that was like the Amazon packages that were delayed. And like we're talking about the genocide happening in Palestine, and not to of course like embrace what Houthis are, but we're talking about genocide happening, and the thing that we care about is that my Amazon package would be delayed. Like it's crazy. Like no one can take, like no one who's a normal person and not a very rich person can take any advantage of this system. So that's the one thing. The other thing would be, I feel like what we need to do as a society, also not as activists only, we need to really make social media platforms responsible for what is there. And, with Elon Musk taking over X, so like Twitter before, or with TikTok being completely like out there. Of course, there's so much also like I guess shit talking about TikTok just because it's from China, and we don't like pay that much attention to Facebook, for example, now. But we remember the Brexit, we remember Donald Trump's elections, and like we remember all of these things that were so much heavily connected to social media. And I am very thankful that there were groups in Europe that we're trying to make European law as much like aligned with our needs towards them as possible. It's not perfect yet. And I feel like also politicians, it's again like a kind of like I feel that they should do better. And kind of leading to your question, finally, I think that what we're trying to do is very often to show people like the source that we're taking our information from. But with so much information around, it's very easy to just like kind of fall under this like fake news or misinformation, problem, I guess. And I feel like just creating a new sources that are like heavily well researched and all of that is very important. Also, like data-based communication within social media is something that we're still lacking. So that's what we're trying to do. So we're not only trying to kind of have our demands and goals towards people, but we're also trying to like inform them about things that we can like research very, very well. For example, about, I don't know, new ways of thinking about the economy, be that degrowth, be that the donut economies or others. But we're trying to like provide them with actual information that is not only this like rapid news, and yeah, that would be my answer.
And staying on the online field, let's say, there is also a big challenge that is not so mainstream about online activities. That is something very abstract for everyday life perspective of people who are not engaged so much in thinking and reflecting how technology works and how it is that I have the internet and I can put something on a cloud. So my question would be how to be sustainable regarding such challenges as digital pollution and the carbon footprint of online activity in digital activism, and how to balance actions regarding pollution and impact. And of course, the question is, should it be an issue or the cause is the bigger than the limitation of it? So feel it open, like without the pressure, because I know that this is quite challenging and this is quite complicated issue that is not putting so much on a spot generally in the discourse in different perspective. From time to time we hear about like the big server places in Africa, for example, and stuff like this. So, but I still was wondering, do you think and discuss, for example, it as an issue? Is it also an issue in climate activist movements? Because this is the interesting
I feel like
part.
we don't talk about it enough. But that's also like another thing. There are so many things we have to discuss, so many things we have to do, that we will not be able to do everything. And I think that that's why also we need this more distributed movement that take care of like very specific stuff. For example, like the movement in Poland right now, we're not like a very core, big mass movement. We have like different groups who take care of like particular things, particular laws, of also like they have different theory of change to do stuff. So I feel like that's something that that like we should see that way, that like it's okay if, I don't know, if Wschód will not be taking care of this particular example, because it might also be not like our kind of, I don't know, not background, but like expertise, if that makes sense. I feel like for sure, like what is happening with like kind of collecting and like kind of progressing within the internet sphere, let's say, also with AI and like all of these things. I'm not an expert again, but I feel like what is happening with that is very similar to what has been happening with fossil fuels. You know, people in the global north understood that fossil fuels is not the best way to go on. Not, of course, all of them, but some of the leaders did. So now, and there's so much money, right, in the renewable sector. So it's okay now to just like do the same thing again, like use this whole neo-colonial rule to, for example, like have new extraction of gas in Africa, because very often like the not to generalize, but again, for example, like that's the thing with Uganda, like French companies, because the French community, like the French like the French people, they do not agree for any new oil or gas investments. So that like the biggest French oil company, Total Energies, they decided to like focus on Africa now. And, you know, they're trying to build this huge pipeline, the Eco Pipeline, who's trying to link Tanzania and Uganda. And it's also going to be around Lake Victoria, which is the biggest lake in the world. And also like kind of like the heart of like this part of Africa's economy and life and everything, and like livelihoods. And I feel like we're then like they're trying to kind of like show it as in like, okay, we're doing that to help the African people to get money. While, of course, we know that, for example, Ugandan government, Ugandan president, they are like completely corrupt people who have like almost like full autocratic rule. They're, you know, like locking up activists who are Ugandan, and that these kind of things would never happen in Europe, in France for sure, because of like the law that we have. But that's something that they're trying to like kind of like they're trying to, I feel like extract their emissions somewhere else. So, for example, in those places that are the most heavily affected by climate crisis, but very often are also the most diverse places. Because, for example, with this area, we're talking about so much biodiversity that we don't have that anymore in Europe, because we just like decided to break with everything kind of here and to destroy everything. So I feel like that's a very similar like problem with what you said, for example, about these huge servers in Africa or elsewhere. Like that's exactly what's happening. Like we're trying to like export the issue, which I feel like it's even more horrible than like the colonialism that we've seen in the 19th century or 18th century. And I feel like we should talk about it more also in a way that it is about justice and it is about us taking care of our problems ourselves, and not again doing the same kind of problem, like the same things again and making the same mistakes again, because these mistakes cost people lives there. So yeah, but also I feel like again it's about the law, and I would love to see more like awareness about that, and also like more initiatives that would be out there, not only doing lobbying in the European Parliament, but also protesting and also showing to the people that, hey, that's something that you should take care of, because your kids are going to be heavily affected by that when they're, I don't know, in high school and they're doing like their social media stuff, if that makes sense.
Also, when you talked about exporting the problems, I thought that, okay, you can export physically the context and don't see it, but the Earth doesn't think about where the problem is created, because the carbon footprint is a total mass, and it doesn't matter if it's in Africa, Europe, or Antarctica. It's
but it
like
does
all
matter
the same.
where it affects people. So and then there's problem, because we're even like, I don't know, like we're making like the French society right now would probably be responsible, because I feel like that's also their responsibility for, you know, for Ugandan people being forced to work around the investments that in the end will kill their communities. Like that's so bad. Like that, I feel like we also lack words very often when it comes to climate crisis, because it's so big and like it's so hard to imagine that. We lack words to describe how evil some of these ideas are. And again, that's about the business as usual. So we have to rethink that. Like, do you feel like that's a progress we want to have? Or do you feel like we can, as humanity, progress in different ways? Because no one talks about us kind of like getting back to the caves. Like, we want to progress, but in a way that is sustainable, not only like on paper and in our like, you know, eco-sustainable as a way, but also in this like the real like way, like what is sustainable not only for Earth, but also for us as communities? Like, what is sustainable for me, so that I can spend time with my family, spend time with friends, have like bigger connections with people and bigger connections with places that I live in, rather than just kind of like getting a job that pays me well and extracts more and more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was just like with my comment about the Earth, that it doesn't matter where it's placed. This is like the more probably argument for those who don't care. But like this is also, I think, important change and focus of the climate movements that are talking more and more on human rights level. That like this is, I think, very very visible perspective, and is really showing the complication. And before we go to justice,
still not doing enough, but
yes, of course, but we are moving in some direction. This is what I really appreciate in your work and many other climate movements, that you are taking a part in different subjects. But before we will move to the climate justice and equity, I would like to ask you the last question on technology, because you are you boldly and very creatively using technology as a platform to share the knowledge, share the campaigns, get involved, and this is visible, and this is kind of like the element of success of the Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion, that the movements spread in such scale. And I wanted to ask you, what opportunities, but also threats possible, do you see in the development of new technology, AI that you mentioned, in the near future, from the, of course, climate movements perspectives?
So when it comes to threats, it's all called algorithm, and that's something that we heavily witness right now with the genocide in Palestine. I think that's something that shows also that we need to take care of like knowing from where the money flows towards the big corporations that social media are now. So like both X, even though it's becoming less and less big when, you know, because of the, I feel like, poor management of Elon Musk, but also with TikTok, like we need to understand that. And I feel like very often we treat the threats that experts say about, for example, how like Chinese governments tied to TikTok are, dangerous for us all. And I feel like we should take it more seriously. And it, like, to me, and if, like, again, I'm not an expert, so maybe someone would shout at me now, but I feel like that doesn't mean that we should just erase that, because like just erasing and like blocking the problem doesn't like challenge the problem in a way. We should just find a solution that would like ensure safety for people, for example, like here in the EU, because that's what we can do with like the means we have in the European institutions. So yeah, I would love to see like more kind of such action and like more awareness about, okay, so what does it mean? Like, does it mean like Chinese spies on my phone? Not really. Let's talk about it. And I feel like algorithm is like a big threat, because very often we, like are just in the bubble and it's hard to like break that bubbles. That's why we're also like trying to tackle different issues, because we feel like when we show people like the kind of like the connection between the issues and between the crises, and we believe that most of the crises that we're experiencing in the world right now are their source is within capitalism, fossil fuel expansion, fossil fuel industry, and all of that. I feel like that's how we reach more people. So when we talk more about inflation, like it's easier for people who take care or like are worried about inflation. It's easier for them to find out what's the real background behind that, what's the real reason for it. And that's not only, that the fact that it is like that right now in history, but also the fact that we're still so much heavily dependent on coal, on oil, on gas, and also the greed of people who are, somewhere in between, like the middlemen who are just creating like so-called greedflation. And that's kind of like the word that I started using and we started using more. So I feel algorithm and like kind of the lack of knowledge about what is really dangerous and what like other companies want us to feel like it's dangerous in a way, if that makes sense. When it comes to like using AI and like different new forms of technology, I feel like we've mastered pretty quickly as Gen Z also how to use internet both to like communicate stuff but also to protest there online. And again, I'm not talking about like signing up for a protest, that's it. I'm talking more, for example, about using Twitter to tackle, politicians. So I remember very, very like one of the most kind of like cool actions that we've done on Twitter was when we were at COP in Glasgow in 2021. And we knew that like Franz Timmermans, so like the current, at that time, the head of European delegation to climate summits, he and vice president of European Commission, he was trying to not be that ambitious as he promised before. So what we've done, we were just started tweeting and we were asking like different, campaigns. Okay, like so what should be in the tweet? And then we were trying to do that. And I feel like that's something that really helped us like get the EU in like bits still, not fully, but in bits like closer to what we believed in. And that's kind of like what we are trying to do each time. Like, I don't know, last time Barbara Nowacka, so Minister of Education here in Poland, she, even though she's like used to call herself feminist and she's very much like out there for human rights, and I remember also her speaking a lot about how like crucial for her politics was the war in Iraq, and then like like few days kind of after her getting, or like few weeks after her getting into the office, she's posting a picture with Israeli ambassador, and like lots of my friends are, come on, like really that's how you're gonna like represent me? Like we are not going to allow that happen. So then we're posting it on our stories on Instagram. We're tagging her, we're asking, hey, what's up? Like why did this happen? And it was really cool to see that then, very like big accounts also were kind of like trying to do that. So that's like these are like the small things that we're doing. We're of course like trying to build our email database so that we have like thousands of people who are there, who support our causes, who sign our petitions. For example, we've had a petition against like this weird unjust referendum that PiS was trying to do last year around the elections, and we've gathered almost 50,000 signatures like under that, and that was our first big petition, so that was cool. And like we're trying to use like these different digital tools to also like gather people around specific issues so that they also know more. So we send them newsletters and all of that. But I feel like with AI, for example, apart from using ChatGPT for many like I don't know, like rewriting our posts or so, I feel like we're still not using it enough. But we have the greatest activists who take care of that. That's not me. That's our social media group, and Konrad, our great producing everything photo video guy who's just perfect at this, and also like has a very big platform himself at TikTok. So I feel like about science and like different facts. So I feel like that's something that we still need to master. But yeah, if you know anyone who can do that, and I know we can also exchange some ideas. So
for sure. If someone who is listening us right now also can comment or try to contact and share some recommendation around the world.
Yeah, we want to find out more.
Yes, this is good. And there are more and more occasions to get more informations. you've touched upon climate justice a few times during our conversation, but I wanted to ask you, how would you define climate justice and equity in climate movements? Because this is the thing that is not so popular, let's say, in the discourse. It's getting more and more. But could you share how do you define it?
Well, it's not popular for a reason in the part of world we live in. I feel like there are like two very valid and two different definitions to it that like kind of describe different situation. So one thing is kind of climate justice, as in to make sure that those who are fueling climate crisis the most are paying the biggest price for it. And, you know, like naturally it's the other way around, because the biggest companies, the governments that are fueling the most, those are the governments and the companies that, first of all, are rich. So they can like ensure more safety. You know, like I cannot see, I don't know, Jeff Bezos running away from the flood or something like that. I know it's stupid to imagine that, but we need to like kind of see that different like images to understand how like the richest 1% is, you know, heavily impacting the climate crisis. And I know this like Oxfam report, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it shows like that like the most of climate disasters and most of like the rise of the temperature in around the world is like the direct kind of like the second, like it's the direct outcome of the actions of the richest 1%. And those richest 1% do not live in places and is not from communities that are the most affected by climate crisis. So we, of course, need to pay for that. Like these people, the rich people need to pay for that, but also the countries who are fueling climate crisis the most have to pay for that. And it's not always Poland. Of course, like Poland, again, is like not a place that fueled the climate crisis the most. When you look at our emissions, it's also very hard because, for example, I don't know if like we should take care of the emissions that were there, you know, between like the 45 and 89. Like I think it should be Russia's emissions before, again, like, you know, with so much like colonization from like both Germany and Austria and Russia, like it should be their fault, not ours, because we are the ones who also were harmed because of them. And very similar to like different colonized spaces, also those places that are still being colonized around the world. So that's the one thing. And the other thing with climate justice, and I feel like it's like easier to understand that in Poland, is to make sure that no one like is being left behind in the process of just transition, if we really want it to be just, because the transition will happen, because that's where the money goes now. That's what we understand. Like also like the politicians have all of the knowledge to understand that the transition needs to happen. But I feel like that they don't hold that much interest in making it just for the common people. So for example, like we need to take care of the miners, we need to take care of people who are working in different sectors that will be heavily impacted by the transition, not by the climate crisis, but the transition itself. We need to, and I feel like Poland is in this moment that we still have to do that, and we still can do that, which is not the case for many places around the world, that the transition for us can actually be a way to ensure that people in Poland will live in better conditions. So we need to see that like climate policy can be very much connected to social policy, that we can, you know, like create more flats and like we can build more houses for people and like make sure that these houses are like insulated and all of that, while transitioning away from fossil fuel industry and like from different things that are fueling the climate crisis. So these are these two things. We in Wschód, like we of course like we're doing lots of solidarity work, not enough, but lots of solidarity work when it comes to the first definition. And that these are the things, for example, we're trying to do around Palestine right now to make sure that people in Poland will have a way to hear about the genocide that is happening and how unjust it is. But to also like hold accountable climate movements around the world, for example, from Austria and Germany, that are not willing to accept that. And they're, you know, it's so funny looking at Germany right now and feeling like these people, honestly, because they've done one of the biggest genocides or like the biggest genocide in human history, they hold the definition for that. Like it's it's crazy when you think about it that way. I feel like as Polish people, we have a very special role in that, to also make sure and to draw attention to that. But we're doing lots of work on the second part. So we're doing lots of work with miners. We're trying to connect to the labor unions. We're trying to create, like a package of, we're calling it the Green New Deal. And we don't have a Polish name yet, but we're like trying to create this package of policies that will like do both, kind of like make sure that climate action is in here and like it is in action, but also like we're trying to ensure that like social policies are like a very big central point, so that people are in the center of the transition, not somewhere there. And like we do not take about interests of the political class. We do not take of the interest about the businesses and all of it. We do take care of our people, and that's what we should do.
And do you heard about any examples of good inspiration about climate justice? Because I was wondering, are equitable climate futures possible? And do you maybe have some examples? It doesn't have to be like the big one, but also like from your work, maybe some inspiration how to include, for example, minorities or people who are excluded on many levels intersectionally to work for equity and climate justice.
That's interesting. I feel like, to me, the biggest lesson that I've had, one of the biggest lessons that I've had last year, was to like understand how energy crisis in Poland works. And that on one hand, it's a crisis of the end of the month, because people don't have enough money to live in a way that just makes them feel safe, or they just do not have like the means to pay for basic things they need. On the other hand, there are many like easy ways to, like from the state level, to ensure that safety for them. And insulating house is one of them. Like there are so many homes. I don't remember the statistics right now, but I remember finding out about how many houses in Poland and how many flats in Poland are not insulated, like in a way that would be energy efficient, but also like enough for the European law that we are obliged to have, like as the country, again, not as like me individual. And it was massive. Like, and we have so much money to that. Like, we have the Just Transition Fund from the EU. Like our new government is, bragging about actually making Brussels again like pay us the transfers from the KPO, which is, I don't know how do you translate that into English, but like the COVID funds for the transition, like necessarily. And I feel like we are not able to the state is not able to put that money on table for people, and for example, like do this massive project on like massive insulation in Poland that would cut so much of our emissions, but also would like create new jobs for people, because people would have to someone would have to do that, right, like physically. And then it would create like so much opportunity for people to live in houses that are actually insulated. Like it's not a crazy idea, or it's not like, I don't know, a heat pump or like something that is a new thing, but it's a very easy thing. Like we've known this tactics for forever. And I feel like kind of these, very easy examples of how like poorly the money also around the transition is still like managed here in Poland. I think that's something that we will be focusing a lot more on. And again, for example, like when you think, for example, about the flat problem in Poland and like the housing crisis, like we have people here in Warsaw owning tens of different flats, and they're staying there empty because they know that it's a great way to make money, to make profits, and to invest. Like it's crazy. Like we should not use flats as the best like investment occasion out there. Like it should not be happening, especially in the country. Like 60% of people under 35 years old have to live with their parents because they cannot afford renting a flat in Warsaw, not to mention owning it. And I feel like that's also a way, for example, like you don't have enough money for Just Transition. Okay, you can have that while taxing people who own these flats, and also like making sure that, for example, like having 3 or more flats is heavily taxed, so that people just don't see it as an investment opportunity. It shouldn't be an investment opportunity. It should be our right to have that. So, and is it like that much connected with climate crisis? No, but again, when you think about that, we need so much money to drive this transition. It is, and I feel like we have to. And I also know that this year will be about like way more about taxing the rich and like making gathering money to pay for the transition, both globally but also here in Poland.
And moving to an end, I wanted us to put aside the limitations, the challenges that we see right now, and focusing on hopes and dreams. And I really wanted to ask you, what do you wish for climate activists for next 10 years?
My God.
Quite even more than that the 5 years that we mentioned before.
In 2019, we were always saying that we have only 10 years to stop 1.5. Now we know that it might be gone. So I've always had this 2030 as the kind of the finish line, when I don't I cannot imagine myself after 2030s. I started to do that very lately, and it's hard to imagine myself then. So it's a hard one. I think I would wish us three things, and the one would be resistance, because it's super hard to keep going sometimes, and I know that for many people, for very various reasons, it's just hard to, on one hand, tackle this crisis daily as just a normal person who again cannot afford basic stuff, because it's also it's so normal that you don't have to be the poorest person out there to have that problem. So for sure, resistance. The other thing would be community, because also I feel what Wschód really showed me is that having a very solid community that supports you and is willing to do the crazy stuff with you is something that gives you this hope on daily basis, and also makes things possible. I don't know, we wouldn't confront so many politicians without the whole community. We wouldn't be able to, have fun. And yeah, that's very important. And the third thing, and it's I gotta say, it's not the easy one, and I don't think it's gonna be positive for everyone, but a big lesson of solidarity, because I think that climate activism is also about having the means and the knowledge, the organizational knowledge about how things work, how to organize protests, how to gather people, how to make campaigns, how to run campaigns. And we should do that when we see that the whole world is falling apart. And I feel that very often, especially the westernized or Western activists, they do not see the point, for example, in, talking about the genocide in Palestine and having connection with these people. To me, I'm seeing the protests in Germany against the AfD now, so the far right party that is polling very, very well in the polls, and they do that. But again, people white German people talk about migrants being expelled from Germany without including these migrants because they're pro-Palestinian in the demonstrations. And I feel that's something that needs to change around the world. Also in Poland, we need to do way more of solidarity work that actually helps people, and that actually is not only about this kind of token activist. Here's my Colombian friend who's gonna speak to you today, but also we need to do more work that would challenge ourselves and things that we are taught in our throughout our lives that are normal, and that they're not normal, and they're very colonial or racist and so on and so forth. So I feel we should do more of that. So community, solidarity, and resistance, this three. And I also wish that to myself and to you guys.
And we also wish it back to you and other activists around the world. And with that, I would like to really thank you for this wonderful conversation, full of ideas, full of inspiration. Thank you so much
Thank you for having me. It was very nice. And once again, it's so cool for Wschód to be just 1 year old and be included in such things. It's very, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking for more resources in topics like countering disinformation, cybersecurity, personal and organizational resiliency, building positive narratives, or media literacy? Visit the Hive Mind platform, an online hub with free content, tools, online courses, and ability to connect with digital activists across the globe. Embrace the power of community with Hive Mind.